Let me tell you about the fish that made me a fisherman. I was a little boy, and my grandpère handed me a cane pole with a worm and a bobber on it and pointed me at the edge of a pond, and inside of a minute that bobber went under. And I hauled up this little round fish the size of my hand, flat as a saucer, colored up like somebody painted it, flapping and fighting like it was 10 times its size, and I was hooked. Not the fish, me. That was a bluegill, and near about every fisherman you'll ever meet started the exact same way. That's the beautiful thing about this fish, and it's why I love teaching it. The bluegill is the easiest, most willing, most forgiving fish in North America. It's the one that teaches you to fish. But most folks catch a few as a kid and never bother to actually learn how the fish lives, and so they never learn to catch them on purpose, by the bucketful, anytime they want. My name is Bo Landry. My grandpère taught me you don't chase a fish, you learn him. Where he lives, what he eats, what he's scared of, how he moves through the year, and once you do, he'll tell you right where he is. So today we're going to do that with the bluegill. First I'm going to teach you how he really lives, and then I'm going to show you how to catch him. And I promise you by the end, the catching part's going to feel like the easy part. 'Cause with the bluegill, once you know his one big secret, you'll never wonder where they are again. Let's get into it. Who the bluegill is. First, let's get to know him. The bluegill's a panfish, called that because his little round flat body's shaped just like a frying pan, and that's exactly where a mess of 'em is headed. He's in the sunfish family, kin to the largemouth bass, the crappie, the pumpkin seed, and a whole passel of other sunfish. He gets his name from that bluish color down on his lower jaw and gill plate. Now here's the first thing that matters to a fisherman, and it's what makes him so much fun. The bluegill is greedy and curious. This little fella will bite at damn near anything. He's so curious he'll bite an empty hook just to see what it is. He's aggressive, he's willing, he's not shy one bit. So the whole trick with bluegill was never getting him to bite. You get him to bite by looking at him funny. The whole trick is finding the school, and I'm going to give you the key to that in just a minute. He usually runs about 7 to 10 inches, though they get bigger. The world record was a giant near 15 inches, caught down in Alabama, pushing 5 pounds. That's a dinner platter of a bluegill, a fish of a lifetime. But even the hand-sized ones fight like the devil. Pound for pound, ounce for ounce, a bluegill fights harder than near anything that swims. Hook one, and he turns that flat body sideways against you and pulls like a fish 5 times his size. That's why kids and grown folks both grin the whole time. Everything's trying to eat him, and that tells you where he hides. Here's a part of his life that's the key to finding him, so listen close. The bluegill spends his whole life being hunted. Everything eats him. Largemouth and smallmouth bass, pike, muskie, walleye, his own big cousins hunt him. Snapping turtles, otters, herons, ospreys. If it's bigger than a bluegill and it lives near the water, the bluegill is on its menu. Now, a fish that gets hunted that hard learns one lesson deep in his bones. Stay close to cover. Always. A bluegill is almost never sitting out in open water where a bass can run him down. He schools up right next to something he can dart into. Weeds, brush, a sunken log, dock pilings, lily pads, rocks, something between him and the jaws. So here's your first finding rule, and grandpère would say write it on your hand. Find the cover, find the bluegill. You see a fallen tree laying in the water, a weed bed, a dock, there's bluegill there. I near about promise you. Fish in the open middle of a pond for bluegill is fishing where they ain't. Fish the edges, the cover, the messy spots, that's home to him. And here's a funny one that tells you how clever he is. A bluegill will actually follow a messy eater like a turtle around, hanging just out of biting range, snapping up the bits the turtle stirs up and leaves behind. He's smart enough to get a free meal off a predator without becoming one. Don't ever think this little fish is dumb. He's not dumb. He's just willing, and that's a different thing. Now one more. Thing about where he lives. 'Cause it matters, and it's a clue most folks don't know how to read. The bluegill needs water with good oxygen in it, And in the dead of winter, under thick ice and snow, some ponds run low on oxygen down deep, and the bluegill's one of the first fish to feel it. So here's the tell, and the ice fishermen among you know this one. If you cut a hole in the ice and you see dead bluegill floating up in it, that's the pond telling you the oxygen's low right there, and you're likely wasting your time fishing that spot. Move on and find better water. That's not a sad thing. That's the lake talking to you, same as always. A good fisherman reads every sign the water gives him, even that one. The one big secret. The beds. All right, here's the secret I promised you. The single biggest key to the bluegill. The thing that turns you from a kid who catches a few into somebody who fills a bucket whenever he wants. And it's all about how he spawns. When the water warms up into the high 60s, along about late spring into summer, the bluegill goes to spawn. And he does it in a way that hands you the fish on a platter if you know what to look for. The male bluegill swims up into the shallows, into a sandy or gravelly spot, and he uses his fins and his tail to fan out a little round crater in the bottom. A nest looks like a dinner plate scooped into the sand. And here's the thing. They don't do it one at a time. Hundreds of them spawn together in the same good spot, fanning out nest after nest right next to each other so the whole bottom looks like a honeycomb, like a mess of craters all bunched together. We call that a bluegill bed. Now think about what that means for you. In spawning season, all those aggressive, willing bluegill are stacked up shallow in one spot, packed in tight, and the males are sitting right on those nests defending them, which makes them bite anything that comes near out of pure orneriness. You find one of those beds, and you have found 100 fish in a bathtub, and they are all mad and all biting. That is the easiest, fastest fishing there is. On a clear, calm day, you can often see the beds, those pale, round dishes on the bottom in the shallows. Or you smell them. Honest, a big bluegill bed's got a distinct fishy smell. Find the beds in early summer and it's not even fair. That's the secret. That's the whole ball game. And here's a bonus grandpère taught me. Those beds get used year after year. And even when it's not spawning season, you can sometimes still see the old craters on the bottom filled with a little sediment. That tells you where the good spawning ground is, so you know right where to come back next spring. The lake keeps its own map, if you know how to read it. Now, grandpère taught me one more thing about those beds, and I got to pass it on, 'cause a good guide tells you the whole truth, even when it ain't the easy part. When you find a bed like that, it is so easy that you can catch about every fish on it if you want to. And the ones sitting on the nests, the ones biting hardest, those are the big males, the papas guarding the eggs. So here's the honest word. Take a mess of them for the frying pan, absolutely. That's what they're for, and there's plenty. But don't be greedy and clean out a whole bed, every last one, every time. You leave some of those big males to guard those eggs, and you've got bluegill on that bed again next year and the year after. Take what you'll eat, let the rest go to make more, and that pond'll feed your grandkids someday too. That ain't just being nice. That's a fisherman thinking past today. Grandpère never left a spot worse than he found it, and neither will you, where he is the rest of the year. So the beds are the springtime and early summer secret. But the bluegill moves through the year, and if you know the pattern, you'll find him any season. In the spring, he comes shallow, hunting the warmest water he can find, getting ready to spawn. So you fish shallow, near cover. Through the warm months, he loves it warm. He's happy in water others would find too warm, so he stays fairly shallow around his weeds and cover and docks. Then, as fall and winter come on, and the surface water turns cold, he does the opposite. He gathers up in big schools and slides out into deeper water, hunting that little bit of extra warmth down deep. So come the cold, you fish deeper and slower for him. That's the whole calendar. Shallow, and on the beds in spring and early summer, around cover in the warm months, deep in the cold. Learn that, and the bluegill's got no place to hide from you. Now, how to catch him. All right, now the fishing part. And here's what I promised you at the start. 'cause you already understand how he lives. This is going to be the easy part. Everything we do now just flows straight out of what we learned about him. Fish light and fish small. Remember, he's a little fish with a little mouth, so everything's small. A light rod, light line, and small hooks. This is where folks mess up most. They use too big a hook. A bluegill's mouth is tiny, so a little hook is the single most important thing. Small hook, small bait, and he can actually get it in his mouth. Worm and a bobber. The greatest bluegill rig there is. A little piece of worm on a small hook, under a bobber, set so the worm hangs down near the cover. That's it. That's the rig my grandpère put in my hands, and it's still the best bluegill catcher ever invented. Give this greedy little fellow a piece of worm dangled by his cover, and he cannot help himself. And the bobber does double duty. It hangs your bait at the right depth, and it shows you the bite. When that bobber twitches, dips, and slides under, that's him. That little bobber going under is how 10 million of us caught our first fish, or a tiny jig. If you'd rather, a little jig tipped with a piece of soft plastic or a waxworm is deadly, especially in the colder months when they're deep. You drop it down to 'em and give it little twitches. Same idea. Small, near the cover, or down where they're holding. Now, here's the thing folks get wrong, the depth. A bluegill mostly feeds looking up, so you want your bait above him or right at his level, never dragging on the bottom under him where he can't see it good. So this is where that bobber earns its keep. You slide it up or down your line to set how deep your bait hangs, and you go hunting for the right depth. Start shallow, a foot or two down. Nothing? Slide the bobber up so the bait hangs deeper. Try again. Keep stepping it down till that bobber goes under. And here's the key. That first bite just told you the depth the whole school's holding it that day. Now, you set everybody's bobber to that same depth, and it's on. Grandpère called it finding the floor they're standing on. You quit guessing the second the first one bites, and when they're pecking but not taking it under. Sometimes, especially with the little ones, you'll see your bobber just twitching and dancing, but never going all the way under. That's bluegill pecking at your bait, stealing little bites. 2 fixes. 1, downsize, smaller hook, smaller piece of bait, so when he does commit, he gets the hook. 2, when you see those little dances, give it just a heartbeat, then a gentle little lift, not a big yank. He's got a small, soft mouth. A hard yank pulls it right out of him. A smooth little lift when the bobber dips sets that small hook just right. Don't be shy with your bait, but match his little mouth. He'll hit a bait bigger than you'd think 'cause he's greedy, but that little mouth means you keep the hook small, even if the bait's a decent chunk. And a piece of worm beats a whole nightcrawler for him. He's more likely to get the hook with a piece than to just steal the ends off a big one. 2 things that'll save you grief. Couple practical things grandpère drilled into me 'cause a good guide tells you the whole truth. Carry a hook remover or a hemostat, those little forceps or a hook-out tool. Here's why. A bluegill's got a small mouth and he takes a bait deep, and your fingers or even needle-nose pliers are too big and fat to get in there. A little hemostat gets the hook out quick and easy without hurting the fish or your fingers. It's a cheap little tool, and it'll save you a world of frustration. Mind those spines. That fin along his back's got about 10 sharp little spines in it, and it's his defense against a base and against a careless fisherman. Get poked, and it stings good. So when you go to hold him, you lay your hand over his back and fold that fin down flat as you grip him, from the head back. Handle him right, and those spines lay down, and he's harmless. That's not the fish being mean. That's just a little fish that gets hunted by everything, wearing the only armor he's got, bringing it home. So there's the bluegill, top to bottom. Greedy, curious, hard-fighting little panfish that lives his whole life next to cover 'cause everything wants to eat him, comes shallow and stacks up on those honeycomb beds to spawn in the early summer and slides deep when it's cold. And once you know all that, catching him is about the easiest, most fun fishing there is. Fish light, small hook, a piece of worm under a bobber near some cover, and find those beds in the early summer when you can. You see what we did there? We never once talked about some expensive rod or some secret lure. We just learned to fish. That's the whole thing grandpère spent his life teaching me. You don't need the fanciest tackle in the shop. You need to understand what's under the water. Do that, and the fish tells you the rest. And there's no better fish in the world to learn that lesson on than the bluegill. He's forgiving, he's willing, and he'll teach you more in an afternoon than a fancy fish will teach you in a year. Take a kid out for bluegill. You'll be handing him the same thing grandpère handed me. Tell me down below, what was the first fish you ever caught? And I'd bet $1 a lot of you are going to say bluegill or sunfish. I read everyone.